Owen Meadows, founder of Armor Boxing. The Armor Foundation is an organization that helps people get free from mental health struggles through the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Welcome to the stage, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I really appreciate it. And can we just give a round of applause for Jason real quick? Just like thanks for doing this. Thanks for putting this on. This is the first one, so I can't wait to see, kind of what this turns into in the future. And it's such an honor, brother. So I really appreciate it. And Ray, Claudia, Kristen, great job. I really enjoyed it. There's definitely a theme. There's definitely a theme here. And just for me. My story, really the title of this quick message is an unexpected path. That's really what I'm going to be talking about. So, um, I'm going to actually share my screen, and I'm not going to share a bunch of PowerPoint or anything of that nature. I'm just going to show you some pictures because I feel like we all like pictures. Let's, look at some pictures. So, I'm going to do this real quick and just give me a second, please. But while I'm pulling this up, um, actually, it's not going to let me do it. That's okay. We don't need pictures. So my story and my journey with mental health actually started in 2021, and a month before that happened, I went to Bozeman, Montana. So do we have any hikers like in the room? Just like put up your hand maybe if you like to hike. All right, sick, great. Well, this is like on the west, in the wild, wild west. Hiking is a bit of a different animal, if you will. I went with two of my good friends. And one of them is very familiar with the area. So one of them went to Montana State University, and we went out really excited and going on vacation and going to see beauty and trees. And I'm definitely an outdoor guy. And so we decided to do this hike. It's called Highlight Peak. And if you're ever out in Montana, check it out. But we want to do this hike in Highlight Peak. And if you know anything about hiking in the West, you know that in order to do a really tall hike the right way is you want to start early in the morning. And if you start early in the morning, that means you summit around 1 or 2 p.m. and then you can get down the mountain before the sun sets, ideally. And I think you guys are going to kind of know where this is going. So we go out to Highlight Peak, and for some reason, one or another, we start the hike around about noon, 1 o'clock. And so this hike consists of just beautiful greenery, the trees, the sunlight. And I really wish you guys could see these pictures, but that's okay. You're imagining in your own head. And it started off exactly as we wanted it to. Just beautiful flowers and the crisp air. It's about 50, 60 degrees. It's just perfect. And so we're ascending this mountain, if you will. And so we go through all terrains. We go through meadows, we go through snow, we go through fog, we go through rain. I mean, this hike consisted of absolutely everything that you could ever imagine, right? We're making our way up and we get to the snow. We get to the bald of the mountain. And there was a moment there where we summit. We make it to the top of the mountain, and me and my two buddies are about at least 100 yards apart, covered in snow. Mind you, I don't have any boots. I have hiking shoes, not hiking boots, hiking shoes. I've got a light jacket on. I got pants. It's maybe 27, 30 degrees. And so there's a moment when I get to the top, and it's about 6 p.m. when we summit. And I look down at my shoes, and then I look at the wilderness just below us. The sun sets at 7:30. And how long did it take us to get up that mountain? It took us about 5 hours to get up that mountain. And we're about to descend about a 12,000 foot mountain in about 4.5 hours through the wilderness in the complete darkness. And listen, I don't want to sound like a wimp here, but I was not looking forward to that whatsoever. And I got terrified. So there's two moments at the top of this mountain, looking down at my shoes, looking at the snow. The snow was about 6 inches above my feet. And then going in and going into the wilderness and having this moment where like everything is getting dark. You don't know where you are. You're a couple thousand miles away from home. And in the middle of this descent, it starts sleeting and hailing on our descent. And then on top of that, the last thing I'm going to say about this is that we had headlamps, right? So you got to have headlamps in order to navigate the forest and to navigate the wilderness, especially in Montana, effectively. Well, two of us had headlamps. One of them didn't have a headlamp. Jesse didn't have a headlamp. And so what had to happen is Wyatt, who was familiar with the area, was out front. Jesse was in the middle, and then I was in the back of the crowd, and I was guiding Jesse along the path and along the journey, back home and back to the car, back to a hot shower, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I feel like that is a perfect explanation in the middle of that story where the beginning of my journey started off in it's sun and sunshine and greenery and beauty and outdoor. And then I found myself in the middle of a path that is sleeting, that is hailing, that is freezing, that the wind is burning my cheeks. And I'm completely drowned in underwater. And that is how this whole thing started. And so I think many people are on that journey. I myself have obviously been on that path, but I think that's many people outside of this call are on just an unexpected path. And people believe, and I believe, that the presence of darkness on the path means you're on the wrong one. It's not the case. And I think all of you know that, right? And Ray even talked about this of saying like, being in a position where you've been through something really hard and also Claudia, I love the way you put this as well, is there's multiple instances where you go through the valley of the shadow of death. It's not a one-time thing, it's a multiple time thing. And that is also a great indication of sort of my story. And I'm going to start from there, my two shames. So two shames, I'm going to be a little vulnerable here because I feel like in my experience with mental health, it's always been a shame of the past or a fear of the future. It's either one of those two things. And so the cool thing is these two shames made up what is armor today. And Jason's heard the story, and a couple other people have heard the story in the call. But so one of the shames starts in middle school. Shout out Kristen. So I was bullied in middle school, and I was a really shy kid and very quiet. And in a middle school cafeteria, this guy thought I said something about him. His name's Matt, and this is actually on our website as well. His name's Matt. So Matt believed that I said something about him. And so Matt threatened to beat me up. And instead of being confident, instead of being defending myself, instead of sort of stepping up for myself, I cried and I wept in a middle school cafeteria in front of everybody. And the next morning, thank God I was a late sleeper. The next morning, I showed up to my class late and I walk into class and everyone is looking at me. And I'm like, I don't know why everyone's looking at me. I'm already a shy kid. This is my worst nightmare. Well, no, it wasn't my worst nightmare. What happened is Matt was waiting for me at my locker that morning and he was shadow boxing. The irony is incredible because later I would become a boxing trainer, but he was shadow boxing, waiting for me at my locker. And because I was late to school, I I didn't, I missed Matt. Matt, my science teacher, actually forced Matt to go back to his class. I arrived late and everything was fine. That experience completely changed my life in the essence of that same experience when I was in middle school followed me to when I was 24 years old. And people ask me all the time, armor boxing, how did you start boxing? How did you start training? Where do you sort of get the encouragement or motivation to encourage and motivate others and also encourage and motivate yourself? That experience when I was a kid told me that I need to prove to everybody in my life that I wasn't a wimp. That is the reason I started boxing when I was 24 years old. At 24, that experience when I was 10 or 11 followed me for 14, 15 years into adulthood. And many of you are kind of shaking your head saying like, yep, yep, yep. Well, our pursuits and kind of our journey along this path, many times it's to prove something to ourselves and to other people that's simply not true, if you will. And so one of the ways that God has used my shame of I'm not a wimp is I started boxing and I started training and I started encouraging other people. And I actually found purpose in that, if you will. And that's the reason I started this whole process of training and encouraging. Like I said, that's the first shame. I'm not a wimp. So I got to prove to everybody I'm not a wimp. That's one thing. And many of you can relate to this. You got to prove to somebody that you're not something. And then number two is so because of that bullying experience when I was in middle school, I had to compensate for it. And we all have compensation metric, ways that we compensate sort of, in ways that prove our worth. But my compensation when I was in school, especially in high school, is that as I started to grow older, I started to gain attention from the opposite gender. So I started to gain attention from women when I was in high school I was growing and I was apparently becoming more attractive. That's obviously faded, but I compensated my bullying experience with being able to attract women. And this followed me up until I was in college. And the same people that bullied me when I was in middle school became my friends in high school because I all of a sudden started to get attention. And so one of the ways and one of the other shames that was in my life is what I did was I serial dated a lot and I continued to court people because that was my identity and I had to compensate for my middle school experience to prove to everyone I wasn't a wimp. And also this is also a way to compensate for any kind of flack or any kind of bullying from other people. So what I did is I just serial dated. And as I got older into my 20s and as I graduated college, I had to prove to everyone that I wasn't a relational failure. So marriage was a big deal to me. And it's so funny I'm talking about this because my girlfriend's on this call. Shout out Hannah. But marriage was so important to me as I move forward. And so what happened was is these two shames combined together. Okay. So I into my, talking about the relational shame, right? So thanks, Kristen. So so when I was in my 20s, I went on a mission trip to the Philippines. If you've ever been to the Philippines, it's fantastic. I would highly yeah, recommend it to anybody. But I met a girl in the Philippines. And and this is something that I continue to pray over. I was just actually 26, 27 years old. And a long story short, because I've already talked for a while, a long story short, but I thought I was gonna marry this girl. And what happened was is that I was not supposed to marry her. It was very clear I wasn't supposed to marry her. And Jason and I walked through this for a good while. But what happened was is that the relationship ended and it failed. And I say it failed. It really didn't fail. It actually succeeded. But out of that, so what happened was at the very end of that relationship, when I figured out it wasn't fail, I started to experience anxiety and depression for the first time. Why? Because for the first time, I wasn't able to disprove one of my shames to other people that I wasn't a relational failure. So what happened was is whenever that relationship ended and I figured out what it wasn't going on, I had all of these ruminating thoughts in my head and all of these things. I lost control, literally lost control of my thoughts as it relates to my future. I had a unsaid expectation for my future. Many of us have unsaid expectations for our future. My unsaid expectation is I would be married by the time I was 30. And literally, that one said unsaid expectation, and I never said it. I never wrote it down. I didn't even know it was there. Inflicted and caused sort of like a fire of anxiety and depression inside of me to bubble up, and it turned into two separate times where I didn't sleep for 3 days. I was barely able to work. I mean, I don't have to go into the symptoms. You guys know what I'm talking about. And many of you know what I'm talking about. I ended up on my kitchen floor in November of 2021. And really, I ended up there pleading on my knees, begging the Lord, take it away from me. What do I do with this? My life is falling apart, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, out of this, those two shames created the start of armor in the middle of my pain and in the middle of working through what happened in my past and not being able to prove to my community that I was worthy because I myself didn't find myself worthy. He said, he put on my heart, I want you to train and I want you to encourage people, those that have gone through the same thing you're going through right now. So I want you to take the I'm a wimp and I want you to take the I'm a relational failure. And then I want you to take all of this and the experience with anxiety that you're experiencing right now. And I want you to train and encourage other people. And that's exactly how Armor started in the first place. Armor started from my two biggest shames in my life. And it's led me this unexpected journey into a path that now it's an organization. I mean, if you're not familiar with Armor, it's an organization that, like Jason said, helps people get free from mental struggles and battles. Sorry, I'm paying attention to the comments right now. Mental struggles and battles. And as we go forward, we had 7 events in 2022. We had an average of almost 50 people that come by. We had many people with disabilities, with trauma, with I mean, I cannot begin to tell you the stories of how God has moved through armor, but it's been such a blessing. The fact of the matter is that's just a part of it too. Those two traumas and those two shames created something absolutely beautiful, and that can also be your story and our story and other people's stories as well. Just because there's darkness on your path does not mean there is a mistake or you're a mistake in general. And honestly, if I'm being very vulnerable here, my darkest moments have been after I started armor. So my story is not necessarily one of deliverance. It is a path. Psalm 23, 3, 4. I mean, it says he renews my life. And yeah, snaps. I love it, Kristen. He renews my life, guides me on the right path for his name's sake. And though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will not fear, for you are with me. So it has been a with me. It has been a with me message, not a deliverance. It's not a from, it's a through. And through all of this, guys, my darkest moments, many of you are trying to do fantastic things with your life and about with your businesses and things of that nature. And I'm just going to tell you right now, and Ray talked about this. Ray, this is something you talked about, is it has absolutely been, even today, I'm going to tell a testimony of today. I woke up today and I didn't want to do this. I really didn't, guys. I didn't. And I sat right here in this chair and and it started with praise and it lasted for an hour and a half. It lasted for an hour and a half. I just literally what I did is I just praised Jesus Christ for an hour and a half. And all of a sudden the burden lifts. And that's exactly really the message of what we're trying to drive through my life, but then also armor. And yeah, it's been such a blessing and such an honor to be able to sort of share these testimonies and share this with you. And uh and I just want to again encourage you, embrace the unexpected path, no matter where it leads. And to finish the story of the Bozeman, Montana hike, right? So I'm in the middle, we got two headlamps, right? I'm in the middle of taking a large step off of a stone in the middle of this wilderness. It's all dark. And I begin to recite Psalm 23. And the Lord says to me, He says to me, I've been doing this with you for years and you haven't known it. In other words, I've been leading you and guiding you through a wilderness and through a path through rain, sleet, hail, snow, and you haven't even realized it. You haven't even opened your eyes to it. And that night, through it all, we got back. I was freezing. My bones were shaking. I get back into my car. You know that feeling of just like the relief feeling when you get into, like after that, it's some of that experience. Have you ever taken an ice bath? Maybe you get out of the ice bath, you're like, oh my God, that was insane. Same thing that happened here. I get into that car. I take one of the best showers of my life, and I will never, ever forget that moment. Never forget that moment. So, unexpected journey can take you to an unexpected path or through an unexpected path and an unexpected destination. But I'm telling you right now, those two shames and my unexpected journey has led me into a lot of purpose, a lot of fulfillment, and a lot of joy in the midst of darkness. And so if you can relate to this, I'm so, as I'm saying this, I know that there's a theme, and the theme is not from, it's through. It's not deliver, it's from. It's a path and a journey. Walk it. And thank you so much for having me. And yeah, Jason, thank you again.